Hello and welcome to Diddy on Trial from BBC Sounds and the BBC World Service with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. We are the place to come to find out everything you need to know about Diddy and his upcoming trial. We're unpacking the unfolding story, we're myth-busting, we're fact-checking, and we're answering your questions. And new episodes are with you every week, so make sure you subscribe to the BBC World Service YouTube channel so you never miss a thing. So technically, we only really launched less than 2 months ago, and it already feels like we've lived many lives in the Diddyverse. It's will he get bail or won't he get bail? It's old alleged victims and new alleged victims and bombshell balcony allegations and Busby and Spiro and PB&Js for Thanksgiving dinner and federal indictments and complainants and claimants. And then we get questions from you guys that reminds us that maybe we need to do a bit of a refresher course. I mean, there's a lot of information here. Like we got this one, and I'll read it now. It says, okay, so I've slipped in and I'm hooked, but I have no background. You said that after the long-term girlfriend dropped charges during the first program, but I was never that hooked on celebs, so I have no history of who the long-term girlfriend is. Can you do a brief history of Diddyism and what we know so far? And so, here's our brief history of Diddyism and what we know so far. And helping me unpack this, as always, is our resident senior investigative reporter from Rolling Stone magazine, Cheyenne Roundtree. Hi, Cheyenne.
Hi.
And our resident criminal defense attorney, Shaun Kent. Hi, Shaun.
Hey, how are you doing?
So yeah, a lot of questions have been coming in, particularly from younger listeners who are aware of who P. Diddy is, or Puff Daddy or Puffy, but couldn't necessarily name any of his hit songs or don't really know what he's been up to in the past decade. So we're going to take it back because people have heard of Bad Boy and he is instrumental in the success of this record label. Cheyenne, what is Bad Boy and what's it got to do with P. Diddy?
Well, Bad Boy is Diddy's kind of first territory he marked for himself. It is his founding production company, record label. It is the nexus of everything that came from Diddy.
And one thing that they did is they had talent. I mean, they had musicians who make history. Wasn't one of the first artists he signed Biggie Smalls?
The first artist he signed was Biggie. And so from the gate, Bad Boy burst on the scene with two superstars. There was another artist by the name of Craig Mack who received a Grammy nomination. And then you had Biggie. So it was in that first year or two, it was just a powerhouse, which is kind of unprecedented for a label that he started when he was 23 years old. So it was just from the jump enormous.
And he was also an artist at the time?
He was kind of playing around with being an artist. I think he was rolling out his new acts and he said, I can do this as well. And then so we saw his first album came after Biggie's death and it was Puff and the Family. And that also had mainstream success with I'll Be Missing You.
In the first album that Biggie releases with Bad Boy is Ready to Die, I think, and it's gone down in the history books. I mean, it is a legendary album, and that helps set the scene for who these guys are going to be. But it also sets the scene for this whole generation of rap music that was coming. We've got the East Coast, West Coast beef. So how does that start up, and how is it influenced by Bad Boy?
I mean, it starts with, Bad Boy in New York and Death Row Records in LA. And not a lot of people knew this, but Biggie and Tupac were actually kind of friends. In the beginning, they saw each other as peers and they had this kind of friendship. When I spoke with people that remember that Tupac was helping Biggie out sometimes with just kind of mastering his flow. And you have to remember Tupac at the time was this massive star, and Biggie also was kind of rising to meet him. But then there was a fallout, as there always is in beef in hip hop war. And the fallout came when Tupac was shot at a recording studio, and he thought the guys at Bad Boy set him up. And so from there, this legendary rivalry started, and it ends with the two biggest superstars of the 90s, both dead within, a year of each other.
How did it get to that day where you got to watch your back and have bodyguards and all that?
I mean, it's not just with rappers, you know what I'm saying? People going to attack anybody that's a large figure, They're going to attack you if you're on top, you know what I'm saying? It's just your job to bob and weave, you know what I'm saying?
This week, Biggie Smalls came home to Brooklyn, not as he always dreamed in a blaze of glory, but in a coffin. On St. James's Place, the street where he'd grown up, the neighborhood turned out to say goodbye. Born into poverty, He'd sold crack here as a child, made one record which turned him into a millionaire, and died at the age of 24 in a burst of gunfire.
They're really, I mean, men, but they're really young men at the time. I mean, are they all in their early 20s, including Diddy?
Yeah, everyone is under 25 years old, or like right around the young 20s, mid 20s. And so these are young men who have, the world at their fingertips, are generational talents, and both kind of lost to this war. And so what we saw come of it was, Diddy's kind of star started to emerge after Biggie had died.
Because we do see that quite a lot when people pass so young. They almost pass into myth and legend. In a way, many people have said gave him a sort of credibility that he was linked to that portion of history, that pure hip hop history, which a lot of people see as the golden age, when it was kind of undiluted by huge commercial success and it was all about lyricism and flow. And we had, from that beef, arguably, I mean, I'll say arguably some of the best diss records ever. I mean, I'm thinking there about Hit 'Em Up in particular. I impartially say a favourite of mine. But Biggie, he vocally credits many times Diddy with supporting him, his rising star.
Diddy not only shaped the sound, he crafted the look. It's the whole tone, the whole character of Biggie. And they became friends. He took Biggie off the street and created him into a worldwide name that, lives on forever in our legacy.
And it's interesting you say that sort of created the image of him, because this isn't just a successful rapper. This is almost like he's fashioning a brand, and he does it very successfully. He clearly is very skilled at doing that, and then goes on to do that for himself. I mean, he creates his own brands. I mean, towards the end of the 90s, didn't he launch, is it Shaun John clothing?
Yeah, Shaun John Clothing, which had, New York Fashion Week. He had all the A-listers there, and on tour from Vogue was there. I mean, he was also known even before Bad Boy at Uptown Records, Jodeci, Mary J. Blige. He crafted them and their image. And I think when you think of hip hop in the 90s, that was all Diddy. What they wore, the shiny suits, just the whole image was kind of funneled by Diddy and his kind of genius of marketing and just knowing what people wanted before they knew they wanted it.
Taking something into the mainstream, that I won't say hip hop was ever on the fringes, but it was certainly something you had to be into. Whereas now, I think you could say it dominates pop culture, what we class as pop culture. It leads the way.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of hip hop only a year or so ago. And so Diddy at that time, he's 55 now. He was coming up as hip hop was being invented, and he was hearing those sounds as they were being created, up in the Bronx. He and his predecessors actually created it for it to be this mammoth, the radio stations that were devoted to playing hip hop. That was coming at the same time that Diddy was coming up. So he was part of that wave of hip hop that led us to the music that we hear today.
So we've got this Bad Boy growing and developing throughout the 90s and into the early 2000s. It's not without its own share of scandal. I mean, there's that very famous nightclub shooting.
So it's 1999. It's kind of this New Year's Eve party at this nightclub, and Diddy and his then girlfriend J-Lo decide that they're going to go out. And so they go out to the club. They bring Diddy's new artist, Shine, there, and something happens. There's an altercation. Someone's bumped. We don't really get to the bottom of what happened, but we do know that shots rang out and 3 people were injured. And we know that Diddy and J-Lo take off speeding in an SUV. Shine, the artist, is arrested. And Diddy and J-Lo are promptly arrested as well, for being involved in the mix-up. J-Lo her charges are dismissed, but Diddy and Shine go on trial for this nightclub shooting. And Diddy is saying the gun's not his. He didn't fire any shots. And he is ultimately acquitted. He was found innocent of those charges. And Shine, the artist, says he's the fall guy, and he actually went to jail for, almost 10 years, I believe, and then was deported back to Belize. So it's the first scandal, and we see where Diddy kind of changes afterward and kind of evolves now into this business mogul versus then being kind of this hip hop record label swaggy guy.
Yeah, so you mentioned this evolution, this change. This is something that we see artists do a lot. Madonna, famously. Nicki Minaj has about 75 different names that she goes by. Diddy does it, and he does it pretty soon after the trial in 2001. He becomes P. Diddy and he leaves behind Puff Daddy. Is that the first time he's done that?
It was a clear distinction of, Puff Daddy was the one that was wrapped up in that shooting. P. Diddy is different. And we see the shift for him being record label to businessman. And it was a very distinct choice that he did and kind of set off on that path.
This is where the money is being made in this next phase. We're talking real foundational, generational wealth is being accumulated. And business empires are being built because he has the clothing brand, which is doing really well. Bad Boy continues to flourish and signs multiple other artists throughout the 2000s. And then he's got this vodka brand.
So I don't know if in the UK Ciroc was as big as it was in the US. It is, if you think of when you go out to nightclubs or if you're going to go buy a bottle of vodka for your night out, it was Ciroc. It had different kind of flavors. It was the absolute of, the 2000s. It was everywhere. And Diddy became kind of the influencer of it. It was his. He promoted it. And so that is where he kind of stepped into not just, record money music, not just clothing music, but this is multiple millions. And I believe recently Ciroc, or the brand that owns Ciroc, Diageo, said over the course of that partnership with Diddy, they paid him $1 billion. So that, on top of all the other avenues of revenues he's coming in, that alcohol sponsorship and that partnership was so lucrative for him, and it kind of really stepped him up into that mogul status.
And this is something that's quite new in the rap world, transitioning from rap star to rap mogul business, multiple business owner. He was a blueprint for so many people who then wanted to copy and say, in a country, particularly for the African American community, in a country that have for so long been denied the opportunity to have generational wealth. We're thinking here in the broadest sort of story of arrival on this land to having things like land redistribution not allowed, to have young black men who have made successes of themselves, who have originated a genre of music and then became so wealthy that they are sort of securing future generations of their own family and other people's. To have those people then face these allegations is quite sort of, it's uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people have been voicing that online.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think when you think of what Diddy represents is opportunity, and legitimate opportunity where you're respected not just by your community, but by the world and business leaders. And I think, he founded a media company with Revolt that's hugely successful. And he hosts, Black excellence brunches. And so he's provided a pathway for other people to replicate and show, if he could do it, I can do it as well.
And if we just go to the 2000s, he continues to accumulate lots of wealth. He continues to establish himself as one of the pillars of hip hop on the business side and on the music side. He signs French Montana, Machine Gun Kelly, Janelle Monáe, and Cassie, of course. Now, lots of people have been asking, I know Cassie, but I don't really know Cassie. And it's not fair to just know her as this woman who suffered this assault in a hallway, a hotel hallway. Cassie was an R&B artist?
Mm-hmm.
She was extremely popular.
Yeah, Cassie came out on the scene. She was a model, and she wanted to be a singer. And she had this breakthrough song, Me and You, which I think we all remember. It was everywhere. That she got signed to Bad Boy off of that song. And so as an artist, she is under the Bad Boy umbrella. I think a lot of people were questioning why. She had some singles dropped. She had some music kind of come out a little bit, but it never kind of hit that same fame of Me and You. And then we kind of resigned ourselves to saying she wasn't a singer, but she's with Diddy now, and that's maybe her focus. And we would come to find out that her music was being suppressed, is what she says. So she was this kind of had this really white hot moment when she signed with the off the back of Me and You. She modeled, she did stuff for Ciroc, and she just was kind of this ever-present figure in our kind of pop culture landscape.
Throughout the 2000s, they're together, and then into sort of the 2016s, 2017, we see another Diddy emerge. There's a new persona. We've seen him do it before, like you said, in 2001, but now there is love, or brother love, which he once again makes a big point of announcing, and it kind of coincides with his musical comeback. What's going on with this new era?
Yeah, so in 2021, he makes this kind of big splash in Vanity Fair and says that he wants to be known as Love. He legally changes his middle name to be Love. And it's just this whole mantra about, spreading love, and has his album, the Love album, Off the Grid. But, I think that it might chart back to the loss of his long-term partner, Kim Porter, who died in 2018. And I think after that, you see a real shift of him pulling his children closer and becoming more of this family man.
Yeah, and like you say, there's a new version of him. It definitely is more family focused, and it's way more family friendly. It is the Black Excellence brunches. He opens a school in Harlem. He does a lot of philanthropic charity work. He did this Instagram live during COVID where loads of celebrities came on, and LeBron comes on and Lizzo comes on, and Lizzo's twerking while he's playing music, and he shuts off the live because he's like, there are kids present. No, we can't have that. Which obviously now we know about sort of the raucous events he was hosting back in the day. That just feels so bizarre that he was having these sort of family-friendly Instagram lives where you dare not twerk, you dare not do any of these things. And that's the version of Diddy that lots of young people 15, 16 years old, will know. Maybe not know him as Brother Love, but they'll know him as like a family man.
I came up in Diddy's Ciroc era, where he's the good time, smooth, know what's cool tastemaker. And so, yes, when he had just gotten, Keys to the City, he was just honored with Lifetime Excellence Awards. And then out of the blue, it seems like, he's rocked by these really, really horrific allegations.
Thanks so much for stopping by again. See you soon, Cheyenne.
Bye, thank you.
Shaun's just joined us again. He's very busy at the moment. Shaun, are you allowed to say what you're doing at the moment?
I will say that I am working on a potential death penalty trial down in South Carolina.
So we're not going to take up too much of your time, but there are so many questions that I still have about the federal indictment that we've kind of missed because it's been bail hearings and then allegations about balcony incidents and then Jay-Z. So I just want to start by playing the actual press conference from when it was announced.
Today I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Shaun Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution.
And once again, Diddy, that's Shaun Combs, denies the federal allegations in the indictment, and he's pled not guilty. He says he's never sexually assaulted anyone, man or woman, adult or minor. Okay, so first of all, we've spoken about this before. The federal indictment is just a lawsuit. It's just a story. As you've told us many times, it doesn't mean these things are facts. And he's charged with 3 counts: sex trafficking, transportation for prostitution, and racketeering with conspiracy. So this is the District Attorney of New York who's reading this out.
Correct. That's a correct way of saying it.
And he is going to be working on the side of the government to take away Diddy's freedom.
Correct. And probably the easiest way to say it is that position will be working on the side to take away his freedom, because that person from that press conference is no longer going to be here, because as soon as the new president takes office, they're going to replace that individual. And I think he's already announced that he will be retiring.
Right, okay. We know Diddy denies everything. We don't know that he's done any of the things he's accused of, and he says he's never sexually assaulted anyone. We all know this now, man or woman, adult or minor. The District Attorney of New York says that when they did the bi-coastal raid of his house, they seized videotapes of the freak-offs with victims on the tape.
And don't forget, this is the government's position. They're like, we have this evidence, and this is the easiest way to describe it is it's their opinion of what the evidence shows. They're saying this is our position of what we believe when we get in front of a jury. This is what the evidence is actually going to show. The defense, of course, say we don't believe the evidence will show that. Now, if we go a little further, and I've told everyone, specifically with the freak-offs, at the time of the indictment, the allegations were only dealing with adults. And so dealing with adults, it's on the government. It's incumbent on the government, no matter what is in the video, they must prove coercion. They forced them to do something they weren't likely to do already. So the government can play the videos and the defense can come in and say, yeah, they're disgusting, they're nasty, and all of these people were voluntary participants.
Well, how do you prove coercion?
Hence the issue. And that's always the problem, is going to be the coercion aspect. And so it's going to be a back and forth of, were you actually coerced or were you a voluntary participant? I think that's where so long as it stays this way with adults.
And they also they talk about the other evidence they found. I mean, we've all heard about the baby oil. And like you said, they did that on purpose so that we talk about it. The guns with the serial number scratched off, they reference that as well. Why is that a crime to scratch the serial number off? Why would you do that?
Here's why it's so scary, because of course in America, unlike y'all, we have guns everywhere. And our gun laws are pretty arcane and archaic. The problem with scratching serial numbers off on a gun is we cannot tell where the gun came from, where the gun was initiated, who owned the gun originally, what crime was the gun possibly used on.
Is that illegal to scratch the serial number off?
Absolutely. It's a federal crime. It's a state crime. Okay, so not only is it just illegal to scratch it off, it's illegal to possess a firearm with an obliterated serial number, again, for tracing purposes. The scariest charge that he is facing, even though the sex trafficking and the freak-off parties and the prostitution are getting all of the press, the really scary crime that he's looking at is the RICO charge, the Racketeer Informed Corruption Organization Act, RICO. RICO is he's got a corrupt organization. He is the mob, if you will. And underneath the mob, they're committing so many other crimes that we have to stop him. And so what they're able to do is say, you've got obliterated serial numbers. They're able to bring in so many unrelated crimes that that's what's going to get him in the most trouble, I believe. I can think of, I've been doing this 25 years, I can think about maybe 2, maybe 3 successfully defended RICO charges against the federal government. That's the one they always win.
Picking up on what you said before about the indictment refers to adults who potentially were coerced into doing things they didn't want to do. Well, we've had allegations from minors now, people who were minors at the time brought in civil lawsuits. Does that mean they're going to do an amended indictment? How does that work?
And that's a great question. That's called a superseding indictment. And it's just like superseding indictment. It means it takes the place of the other indictment. So originally when they went to federal grand jury, they said, oh my God, that's awful. And they put a rubber stamp on it. They said, he's indicted. Well, the grand jury, who is an investigative body, kept meeting. Maybe they keep watching social media. Maybe they're watching press conference. They're like, man, he keep mentioning a lot of children. That's nasty. And so the federal government says, we'll keep investigating. And now they're like, well, I think children are involved. So they'll meet again and they'll say, let's rip up that first indictment. And here's the new one that still has all of those original allegations, but now we're placing children with it. I believe this trial in May is not going to happen. I would be shocked. I really believe what's going to happen is a superseding indictment is going to come out, which potentially is going to name children and is going to name co-conspirators. Because the thing that's interesting about his indictment is he's the only name mentioned. And to have a RICO indictment, RICO, the last part is that O, and that's organization. You cannot be an organization of one. So I think other individuals are about to be named, and they're going to supersede and name minors. The reason the government is going to name minors is it eliminates the defense of coercion. I don't care if a 17-year-old girl said, I voluntarily went to the butt-naked baby old freak-off party. You can't, because you're a minor, you cannot consent. The law does not require them to prove coercion. That's why I also think there's going to be a superseding indictment, because they're going to be like, you can't defend that, Diddy. You just can't.
Well, 5 months till we know.
Yeah, 5 months.
But you-
Wait, I think we'll know sooner. I think probably February or March you'll know if there's a superseding indictment. It won't be at the very end. I think probably around February, the government, if they're going to do it, they will announce, here comes a superseding indictment.
Thank you so much for chatting to us today, and I will see you soon, Shaun.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Well, that's it for us this week, but if you've heard something and you weren't quite sure whether it was true, or you just want us to unpack it on the pod, please send us your questions on WhatsApp at +44 330 123 551. That's +44 330 123 551. Or you can DM them to me, or you can find us on socials at BBC Sounds. I'm Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty, and you've been listening to Diddy on Trial from BBC Sounds and the BBC World Service.